Hey guys, it's Scott with Scotty B Cards. In this episode, I want to talk about the sports card bubble. This bubble right now, people are discussing whether it's bursting or whether we're still in the growth stage of sports cards. There's an argument against the bubble and there's an argument for this bubble bursting. So I want to dive into those and kind of show what I think is going to happen. One thing I want to say prior to starting is please like and subscribe. If you subscribe, it helps the channel grow and it helps other people see the content. So I'd appreciate that if you wouldn't mind. But let's jump into it. So the very first thing is the bubble bursting? Here is the argument for a burst. The first one is that this is a really poor rookie class in the NBA. It's no surprise right now. I'm a baseball card collector. I always talk about baseball cards, but basketball cards are probably the driving force of the last 5 years in the hobby. And right now it's one of the worst rookie classes we've ever had. We know we had LaMelo. He just broke his wrist and he's out for the year. And there's a couple other decent rookies, but overall it's pretty weak. You know, Anthony Edwards and maybe Halliburton for the Kings, but that's about it. So it's a poor rookie class and they can't really hold up all these products as well as, 2018 there was Luka and Trae Young, 2017 is Donovan Mitchell and Jason Tatum, and then 2019 we had Zion and Ja and some other great rookies in all those classes. This year is just not the same. And so because of that, people are getting burnt a little bit on opening boxes and that hurts the hobby as a whole because people are going to be mad, stop collecting, all of these things. So that's one argument for it. Probably the weakest one, but it still is an argument I've heard. On top of that, COVID is ending. That is probably one of the biggest ones for this bubble, maybe coming to a close, and maybe sports cards becoming a little bit more irrelevant from where they are now. In March of 2020, no one predicted what was going to happen later that year and throughout this full 12-month period. When March hit, everybody was kind of panic selling. I remember I even posted some polls on Instagram saying, like, what are you going to do? And it was about 50-50 buy versus sell, hold versus sell, all of these things. I even sold a few prospect cards of players I had like Wander Franco just because I didn't want to be left holding the bag just in case that happened. I basically hedged my bets. I kept the players I believed in, like Mookie Betts and Trout, and those have all appreciated awesomely. So I'm happy I did that, but I still sold some cards I regret. But that's just because there was a lot of speculation and doubt when COVID hit, but obviously that didn't last. COVID has helped the sports card market tremendously. Things are up 100% in some cases, like 100 times, not 100%, like 1,000% or more, from where they were a year ago at this time. And so nobody predicted this. And this boom is literally a boom. So this boom isn't sustainable. We're not going to keep up this rate forever. But people are saying because COVID is ending, people aren't going to be in the house. They aren't going to be spending their money on cards so much that things are going to tank and drop. I don't really believe that myself. I think it could happen. It really could. People could return their resources somewhere else. But that is the second argument for a burst happening. On top of that, large cards are dropping. You can see in this graph, LeBron and Michael Jordan, their cards went nuts from basically November on. You can see here's November. LeBron went all the way up to $45,000 almost for a PSA 10 Topps Chrome. It is now pulled back to about $25,000. Still a monumental increase from a year ago. A year ago it's like 5 times higher than where it was. While the Michael Jordan's up even higher. It was a $100,000 card basically in May. It was even way lower. It's like a $30,000 to $50,000 card last March that hit like $800,000 almost. And that was like the highest auction ever. And since then, just like less than a month later, 2 months later, it has pulled back to around $450,000, just $450,000. But they are pulling back slowly. I think this is just because it was super hot. The market was so hot, and because things are pulling back, people are worried the big investors and collectors are seeing massive losses already that they're going to pull out as well, which could cause a burst. But people are worried that this little situation, things pulling back, will be across the board. The market is gaining steam with everyone. I can't remember the exact saying, but essentially once everybody knows about it, it's not a great idea to invest in anymore. Once you start hearing your neighbor who doesn't do anything with investing talk about Bitcoin, it's time to sell out. That's what everybody was saying back when Bitcoin hit $20,000 before it crashed, I think in 2018. And it's come back since then. Obviously, it's around $55,000 to $60,000 a Bitcoin. But the point is, once everybody gets in, it's not a great opportunity to really buy anymore. That's like the fourth argument for a burst is like, it is too hot. Things are going crazy. Everybody knows about it. It's being reported in all these news companies about all sports cards being a great investment, alternative investment, and all these things. Stock market is getting into it. Wall Street's buying cards. All of this is a argument for a burst because it's not sustainable. On top of that, there's greed. This is one for the average collector, people buying everything at Walmart and Target and nothing for people to actually collect, and that could cause a burst because it's just unsustainable to buy a $20 blaster at $100 on eBay or $80 on eBay, whatever it is. And the one thing I want to say is the argument for a burst is this has happened before in the 1990s. So this is the time to panic because we saw some similar things happening there. So you need to panic. That's kind of like another argument. It's more of just like the mob mentality. Vegas Dave really tried to do this where he was like, I predict in 3 to 4 years that the sports card market will be down. It's like, well, yeah, 3 to 4 years, we're going to be down slightly just because it's so hot right now. Like, that's not a great prediction. But he's kind of saying that in 3 to 4 years, everybody will eat their shirt and it's just over. So, argument against a burst. Let's look at some arguments against it. There is a very low supply with super high demand right now. You can see that, like I said, with retail. You can't find retail. I remember I've been in Walmart a few times for lunches. I go by, my lunch at Walmart and I go back to work. I always walk past sports card because it's just a habit now at this point. And every time I'm there, there's always some kids looking for cards. There's always adults looking for cards. Everybody's looking for cards, which is great. That means there's a huge demand, low supply, which is really good for the market. Not great in the sense for collectability, but great in the sense that it's not going to slow down soon. It's not quite there at that slowing down point. The hobby is super addictive. This is a pro and a con. It's a con because you really can create addictions with the hobby, opening packs, buying cards on eBay. It is addictive. So make sure you're careful with that. But because the hobby is addictive, I believe everybody that came in during the COVID boom, I don't think they're going to all be leaving in a mass exodus. It doesn't make sense. Once you get into the hobby, you really stay in the hobby. It pulls you in and it becomes a part of you. Like for me, I do YouTube now for sports cards and I love it. I love it so much. And now it's kind of like a piece of me. I probably, on my phone, I use it mostly for Instagram to talk to people all about sports cards. I use it to look at eBay searches. I use it for YouTube. All these things, like it is all sports cards because it is addictive in the sense I enjoy talking about it. And so I don't think everybody who came in this last year is going to be leaving. That does not make sense to me at all. Bigger names are constantly getting involved. This is a little bit older example, but we have Gary Vee getting in. We have a bunch of Steve Aoki, a bunch of other really big names. Alex Bregman's posting football cards he's bought. Josh Donaldson has one of the most crazy Luka collections I've ever seen. All these celebrities and athletes are getting in, and so that is a good sign of growth. I know before I said in the previous slide, it's an argument for a burst. I also think it's an argument against a burst. Once these high profile celebrities and people who have deep pockets get in, it will help lift the hobby as a whole. It gets it on the map, and also on top of that, it just helps create more attention to the hobby. So I don't think we're at the point of a burst, and that is part of it, which I think why. News reports. This was some people's argument for a burst. I think it's an argument against. People are reporting on the news all the time, record sales. That Luka 1-of-1 RPA sale that happened, that was all over the news media. My father-in-law, who's a CPA, he was listening to one of his investing channels on the radio, just driving home from work, and they were talking about how people are buying portions of sports cards with Wall Street and also just individuals funding these options, and how it's becoming an actual asset class, and it's just becoming bigger and bigger investment grade product, which is good for growth. I don't think we're quite there yet. After that, we just have scarcity. That's the low supply, high demand. Scarcity comes into play where we have artificial scarcity with companies creating short prints of cards like this Acuna, and on top of that, them creating short printed autographs, serial numbered cards. All these things are so much different than the previous burst because there is true scarcity in the market. It may be artificial, but it is still scarcity. Numbered parallels of Mookie Betts rookies, Mike Trout rookies, those go for a fortune, and they're chase cards because they are rare. Can you imagine, I was telling my wife yesterday, can you imagine if Mickey Mantle had in his 1952 Topps had a black parallel number to 50? Can you imagine what that would be worth today? And it's kind of the same thing now. So I think that artificial scarcity and the natural scarcity, just because they are hard to find, is going to boost the value. Topps does not. Sports cards don't reprint like Pokemon cards. Pokemon will reprint an entire product line. While sports cards, they don't reprint previous cards and sell them as the previous cards. They will just reprint them and as a reprint itself, or it's completely different subsets. So that is one good thing as well, is once it's made, and that's not going to increase. So, there's a very finite supply. And this is a much different situation than the 1990s bubble pop. Very much different. And I'll talk about that in just a second. And one thing I want to talk about as well is seasonal declines are normal. You can see, in this previous slide, you saw LeBron and Jordan kind of starting to go down. LeBron got hurt, which hurts his values. He had a high ankle sprain. But also basketball season is middle of the season, kind of going to a close right now. So people aren't really as hyped on it. At the beginning of the year, they all went up. That's when that big spike happened. And that's what's happening with baseball. Here's Mike Trout and here's Acuna. All their stuff is going up. That's because the season is starting. People are excited. It's a natural cycle. It happens every season, every single year. People will say that doesn't happen anymore. It does. It still happens. And here's just a meme that I made. But so nothing against flippers, new collectors. I'm glad you're in the hobby. Enjoy the hobby. It's awesome. But it's true. Here's a regular cyclical off-season price decrease. Like really not scary thing like this rabbit, and these flippers and the new collectors are scared of it because they've never experienced it. It's okay, guys. It is going to be all right because they'll go back up once the season gets hyped up again next year. For basketball, for example. Baseball, we're at that point. We saw massive gains from January to now. Things have gone crazy. Mookie Betts, for example, has gone up a ton. So there's reasons why there was a burst in the 1990s. I want to talk about them and talk about the difference to now. The first one is that there was a high demand, higher than now or pretty close to now, but the supply was way higher than the demand. This picture on the right, this is actually someone selling some cards, but I wanted to show what essentially every single collector's shelf looked like back in the day. Everybody had boxes and boxes and boxes stored. They thought they were going to be worth a ton. They might be now, actually, some of the early 90s basketball because of Jordan inserts and Jordan second year, third year, fourth year, whatever cards everybody's chasing. But aside from the few cards, a lot of this really is just junk wax, And so people would buy so much. You could go to anywhere. You could go to Costco. You could go to Sam's Club. You could go to any store and buy a box of cards. It's way different now. The supply is so low. You can see that with all retail formats, all prices online when they hit the secondary market and prices spike. The 1994 strike in baseball really hurt the hobby itself. Baseball was by far the biggest driving force in the 1990s. It's different now. Now it's basketball, and soccer's rising. I think soccer could overcome baseball. I don't think it would overcome basketball just because it is so worldwide. I don't think that's going to be for a few years, but it could. But the 1994 strike really hurt because people were so turned off to baseball players and to the baseballs itself that they stopped buying. They didn't care about cards anymore. They didn't care about baseball anymore. And that's kind of where the decline has started. So that's one thing that actually helped pop that bubble. On top of that, there were literally millions of each card produced. We talked about the higher supply here, but right now there's probably for what this year is 2021 Topps Series 1, there's probably a few 100,000 of each card. If you look at pack odds, there's a lot of each card, but there were multiple millions of cards back in the 1990s. So we're still way below that number. It's getting high enough to the point where I think you need to be careful in buying base cards and start buying parallels because they're a relatively affordable option. You can get a rainbow foil for 20 bucks of a good player, a gold for 40 bucks. It's a much better buy, and it will increase more. But back then there were millions of each card produced. So it was way, way worse than now. And back then, like I said already, there weren't chase cards. Like you had autographs that were introduced every once in a while, but they were so hard to pull that they weren't really what people were looking for. There were some cool inserts, but there wasn't really any memorabilia cards that came out like in the late 90s, early 2000s. There weren't really any autographs that were consistent. There weren't numbered cards. It was basically you would open a pack and it could be the exact same pack as the previous pack just because correlation was bad as well. But now that there is scarcity or serial numbering or just artificial scarcity, it's a way different situation than back in this previous bubble. So overall, guys, those are just my thoughts. I just think that we're not quite there yet. Every single market, whether it's sports cards or whatever, just like every single asset, there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs in this hobby. My only advice is just stay the course, like Rudy from Alpha Investments always says. Stay the course, because if you believe in something and you really want to put money behind it and you've done your research, you're your best advisor, really. You can listen to others, you can listen to what I have to say, other people, other talking heads on YouTube's opinion, but it comes down to what you believe. So just know, if you believe in something, stay the course in it. Go down with that ship. You never know, it could blow up. Look at Bitcoin. People who got into Bitcoin really early, they're millionaires. I'm not saying we're going to get to that point with cards, but the point is, if people say it's a bad idea, it doesn't really mean it's a bad idea. So if you believe in it, stick with it. Just make sure you're buying smart and make sure that you're really collecting things that in the future people will want and that will be valuable. So other than that, guys, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe again. Have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next video.